There's a concept in cognitive psychology called theory of mind. And theory of mind is the ability for someone to predict what someone else might be thinking in a given scenario. Young children have pretty horrific theory of mind. They're unable, in most cases, when kids are pretty young, to guess what a third party might be thinking in a given scenario. They're unable to, figure out or estimate what someone else might be thinking. So an experiment that's done with very young children to figure out if they have developed theory of mind is a child who's being tested for theory of mind abilities might see a stuffed animal, and the experimenter, the person that's running this experiment, would show the child that a stuffed animal sees a piece of candy. Then the researcher would cover up the eyes of the stuffed animal and put the candy in his or her pocket, and then lift up the blindfold or whatever that's on the eyes of the stuffed animal, and then ask the child who's seen all of this where the stuffed animal thinks the piece of candy is. And in most instances, the child will tell the researcher that the stuffed animal thinks the piece of candy is in the researcher's pocket, because the child ascribes to the stuffed animal what the child knows about where the candy is, even though during this experiment it was very evident that the stuffed animal's eyes were covered when the piece of candy was placed in the experimenter's pocket. And theory of mind is something that is commonly known to differentiate between people with and without autism. So people with autism are known for not doing especially well on theory of mind tests. But theory of mind isn't just something that people with autism score poorly on. I've found through the years that most people who are looking to engage in business relationships don't have very good theory of mind at all. They don't spend much time trying to figure out what the person on the other end of a deal might be thinking, what a customer might be thinking, what problems they'd be struggling with. On a very, very small scale, it looks like salespeople who reach out to someone and try to set an appointment, not using the time zone of the person that they're looking to set an appointment with. So let's say I'm in Chicago and I'm communicating with a salesperson in California. Someone with highly developed theory of mind, in my opinion, would give me times in my time zone, right? Would relate to me on my own terms. They would also do some background and try and get a sense for what my pain points might be. I encounter this lack of theory of mind or lack of consideration of theory of mind all the time when people pitch me on coming onto the Flippening podcast, right? Our popular podcast that often gets over 30,000 downloads an episode. People will pitch me on coming onto that podcast. They'll often, ask to come on and talk about the same topic that someone else just spoke about. They won't say anything about how they'll promote the episode. They won't say anything about sponsoring or even funding their costs. And I think it's pretty evident if you listen to an episode of the Flippening podcast. We usually do a pre-interview. We do, around 2 hours of interviews, the interview lasts 2 hours. There's a lot of post-production. There's cut-ins. There's so much that goes into that. And it kind of confounds me Sometimes someone thinks they're going to come in, be asked questions for an hour, kick off this process that results in several transcripts being made, easily, 8 hours of work to produce that podcast. And that the number one thing that I'm looking for in a guest is good content. I'm certainly looking for good content, but that is the minimum. And in fact, if someone only has good content, they're not likely to be a guest. But, same thing around people who want to talk and are asking for business advice. And, are always operating in their own time zone, even if they're, 12 hours off from where I'm at, for where I am. And hardly consider, what might be in it for me, even from an emotional perspective, right? Even in terms of if you're asking for free business advice, what might someone who gives away free business advice, like what might their internal motivations be for doing that? And so I've come to the belief that although, very, very basic theory of mind is something that most adults have. Most adults do not have highly developed theory of mind around sales environments or around partnerships in general. And it's unfortunate because I believe it costs them a lot when it comes to their careers and when it comes to opportunities for help. And it's unfortunate. All right, take care. Bye.